Are we good to start? What do you think?
Yeah, let's do some introductions because I feel like this is the first time for a few of us being on camera. Yeah,
Yeah,
let's Dan, why don't you start and then we'll turn it over to Elliot, Sean, and then I'll do me.
good. I am Dan Ribbons. I am obviously part of the core team here, one of the founders, and yeah, we started Payload a long time ago and are happy to have everyone here. Elliot?
Yeah, same kind of thing. Just one of the founders. Started Payload back in 2018 with these three guys. So happy to be here.
One thing I just want to interject on real quick with the founding team here. I don't know if many of you guys have heard this story yet before, but we've actually known each other for like probably 15 years or longer. And when we started Payload, I knew it was going to be a dev tool, right? And like the development experience is like key for that. And so we instinctively, like our co-founding team, we're not salespeople, we're engineers. That's it. All three of us are engineers. Dan comes from a heavy database background, Elliot with enterprise software, and I'm kind of the React weirdo. But then we have Sean. And Sean, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, why not? I'm Sean. I'm the operations manager here at Payload. That is a very all-encompassing role. I do literally everything. I'm also a full stack engineer, but I don't really get to write code as much anymore. I just get to talk about it. So,
Alessio, he will be reviewing your PR with images added to the docs shortly. That's a perfect Sean task. Sean is behind the scenes in everything, and he makes a lot of magic happen. He goes by many nicknames. Spider is my favorite, but I can't say the other ones on the live stream. So use your imagination. Okay, Dan, let's go to the agenda.
Let's do it. Yeah, thanks for everyone coming in here. We're going to go through these really quick, probably about 5 minutes each slide or so, some heavier than others. But first, we need to talk about who we are, what we're doing, why database is the topic today. What are our goals with the changes we're about to make? We're going to hit the adapter pattern really hard to let you understand how your existing Payload projects work today and after we release all these database changes. We're going to lock in on like what does the developer experience look like and how are we going to handle some of these huge challenges, because with NoSQL, we're going to have a lot of new things going on when we go to a SQL-like database, obviously. And then we want your input very heavily on the Great ORM Debate. Like, we need to know, what are your favorite tools? What are pros and cons to things you've seen in other platforms? That's all really important to us. And then we need to know what's next and how the community can help everyone help each other. There's going to be an adapter pattern. So if you have a favorite tool and you want Payload to work with that, there's going to be a way forward on that. So we're going to talk through that. Anything else? That's good?
I would just chime in and say that at the end of every one of these slides, we want to pause and give you guys the opportunity to raise your hand and jump in on voice comms even if you want to. It can be chat or it can be literally voice comms. Just raise your hand and Spider here will bring you into the call and let's talk about it, because we broke these slides up into like individual topics and you'll see that more clearly when we get there. But about 5 minutes per slide. Want to open up each slide to see if there's anybody that wants to chime in, and then we'll keep cruising. So with that, I'll go to the first slide.
Yeah. So yeah, obviously everyone here is familiar with Payload. We're doing a lot with MongoDB, and that has been basically cheating because we don't have to do DDL migrations. Like, you don't have to create a table and then add a field or modify a field. Like, you just get that by changing your config. And then obviously, what does that look like for complex data structures? Like, Mongo makes that very easy to nest subdocuments. So we've gotten away with not having to write that much code to have all these very robust fields and localization and all the other things. Mongoose is used pretty much only for CRUD. We've done a really good job where when we started out with Payload, we were all in on Mongo and pulling in these different packages for writing queries and stuff. And we've written all of that over from scratch. The only real plugins we have with Mongo right now are going to be for pagination and maybe some auth stuff. So those will need to be rewritten, but it's pretty minor. And I think that covers it as far as where we are today.
Yeah, I think what's important here is that we really don't use Mongoose that much behind the scenes. We expose it to you so that you can use it if you need to for things like aggregations and whatever you want to do with Mongo. But in the reality of things, Payload barely touches Mongoose at all. So we might build a new adapter with Mongoose to make sure that we still support everything that we currently do. But in the future, we might even just use MongoDB directly and save on dependencies. Like it's just, we don't really need to leverage Mongoose if we don't need to. Any questions on this one? Sean, do you have anybody raising their hand or should we keep cruising?
Not yet. Keep going.
All right.
All right. And so then, if you've all been on Discord, the top discussion, most upvoted, is more database support. Everyone's talking Postgres. Everyone's talking about, sort of an uncomfortableness with Mongo. And we like Mongo. It's obviously worked well for us, but we also know that's always been sort of a can that we've been kicking down the road, that we know eventually SQL support is a priority. We get that, and we want to actually tackle it now. So we've been hearing, we need migrations, we need different database support, and then transactions, there's a couple PRs for, we need to get that down. And then how are we going to make all this work at the edge? And is it going to be serverless compatible? That's going to be important to us. And we never want like the vendor lock-in. We just want people to be able to use the tools they like and have the DevOps that they want. Let's make the database work with everything. It's a big pie in the sky idea, right?
One thing that's interesting to me here is that we obviously have been hearing that we need a migration pattern. And with Mongo, like Dan mentioned, like we got away with a lot with MongoDB like quickly, because every time you add a field with a SQL database, you have to add the column. You have to literally modify the database schema. And we didn't have to do that anymore. So whenever anyone has asked for migrations in Payload, they literally mean to transform your data. There's like two ways to think of migrations. One is to keep your database in sync with your schema, but two is to transform your data. Let's say you add a new field or you rename a field, or you want to take some data from one collection and move it to another collection. And we want to solve for both of those things. Like SQL, right out of the gate, we have to manage the DDL stuff, but we also want to have that combined with a very, very easy to use like actual data migration transformation pattern as well. So those things are like connected, but very distinctly different. Even if you look at any of our competition, like Strapi, Directus, Keystone, whoever, they handled like the DDL stuff, but there isn't a real good pattern for like transforming data from one shape to another. Laravel has that really, really well. It's a functional thing too. It's not just SQL queries. It's like a literal functional thing. Derek, Strappy, welcome. That's a good question. Let me comment on that real quick. With our adapter pattern, I think that a lot of this will be completely community driven. And we're going to support MongoDB, and we're probably going to razor sharpen on one ORM that we support. And I know that it's a good, you called it right there. Like you guys got rid of Mongo, but we're always going to support Mongo for sure. Like to me, I stand by our decision of picking MongoDB in the first place, and we want that to continue to happen. And Postgres, if we have to hire a team specifically to manage our Postgres adapter, then we will. That's priority. These are crucial features to us, and we're going to do everything we can. Any other questions at this point? Callan Robson, good point. We will scream. That's actually one thing that's, I want to comment on that quickly too. We did some testing with some other competitors, and what's funny is that I think Keystone, when you add a field in Keystone, the server stops and you have to restart it manually to add your field to the new schema. And if you drop a table or if you remove what's called a list in Keystone, then you have to confirm, like, yes, I do want to remove this list. And so we will be implementing something similar to try to prevent against harmful migrations in dev mode. But yeah.
To add to that, it's not just adding a field. You could add localization, or you could change a field to has many, and then any existing data you had, you've got to migrate that. And that's a pain point that we hear all the time. So we got to solve that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Turning localization on obviously changes the schema. And that's, maybe we can handle that with an automatic migration that we generate for you, but like that could be destructive. So we want to scream. We will scream at you, Kellen. Get ready.
Yeah, that problem is well understood.
So the memory database, like Redis, that's also a good question. Yes, I think our adapter pattern should be able to support any database, really. We'll get to our thinking around the adapter pattern, but like if we need a database, somebody could build it. It doesn't even need to be us, but if we do our adapter pattern correctly, there will be like pluggable functions that will handle every part of our database interaction with one TypeScript interface, and you can build your own. Anybody can. Like Payload's actual database manipulation is fairly simple. There's not a lot of craziness going on there. We'll talk about that more in a second.
Yeah.
All right, let's keep cruising.
Okay.
I love this slide.
Yeah, so we've touched on a bit of this already, but our goals here is that obviously we need to have total feature compatibility with what we do today when we go to another database. So with that, like our DX is why Payload is so awesome, that we believe we have the best developer experience pattern for any tool like us. And that really comes down to how easy it is to change your config and you're off to the races. But obviously when we introduce SQL, there's going to be some changes. We got to figure out how to make that a really good experience, but still support these other databases. We also want to lock in on making our hot module reloading work perfectly, because I know there's a PR out there right now from DSOD. I don't know if he's here. I don't know how to say his name.
Oh, THGH.
Yeah. Oh, I got the guy mixed up. Anyway.
And he is here.
He is here. All right, cool. So we appreciate that kind of stuff. That developer experience is top priority. And if we can, we need to make it so that even in a SQL experience, you are getting your server changes happen and you can keep developing and not get slowed down. There's kind of a reason we don't have a CLI already, and it's because switching between your terminal and actually changing code is annoying. And so it's kind of a feature in itself that we don't have a CLI. But we probably are going to have to introduce one, but we'll get to that later. We need to have consistent migration workflow, meaning whether you're using SQL or NoSQL, the pattern and like what gets called in Payload looks the same, so that you're not having breaking changes if you go between. If you want to try a different database, you're not rewriting your whole app. Those migrations should work from one to the other. There's going to be some differences, obviously, with SQL and NoSQL, where you don't have to do all the SQL changes, but the pattern for, hey, my data was this shape before, like the actual data, and then the new shape is going to need to work for NoSQL, as well as what we need to do for DDL for SQL. And we want to nail down a very consistent transactions workflow. That is huge for migrations, because if you have like a multi-step migration where, say, it's kind of like an ETL pattern of like, hey, I had this old data, I need to grab that, and then I need to transform it into the new shape and map that into some new fields or another collection. If something goes wrong and an error happens in the middle and you're on your prod migration run, your transaction really needs to be very atomic. It needs to go back to a safe point. It needs to roll back. And we're also thinking about, well, how do transactions look for just our normal payload requests? So we want that to be dialed in too. And then making sure everything's edge compatible. James, do you have much to add there?
Yeah, I really like the edge compatible part. There's going to be some tricks with that, because a lot of databases are, as everyone knows, like based on a long running connection. And there are HTTP APIs, like Prisma has that, where you can more easily connect to a database and run a query without having to have a long-standing transaction. And that will help with like cold starts and initial startup time. And that's going to be crucial for us. So I want that to be kept in mind as like a goal of our adapter pattern. If you're running a Postgres database and you're using a service that has an HTTP pattern, then we need to support that.
Got a question here.
Yeah, so a couple questions real quick. Julian, welcome. I want to go to Colombia so badly. I meant to go to Bogota one time, and my passport expired like 3 days after I was supposed to arrive, so I did not go. But your adapter,
that's what he's saying.
What'd you say?
James wants to rent a room from you, it sounds like. Julian.
Yep. I'm coming over. Get the bed ready. But yeah, the adapter pattern, that's exactly our goal. We're going to talk about that in more depth shortly. And then Derek, Cockroach DB, totally. I am Root is actually a boss. That dude is a maniac. And Big fan. So that's on the radar. And yeah, Berlin. I think Berlin might beat out Colombia on my list of places to travel to next. Sorry. Big fan. I used to work for a German company. Miss it. All right, we're gonna keep cruising.
Okay, so you might be wondering, like, well, how's this going to work? What happens to my existing project? What does this look like? We're moving towards we want like long-term release stability. We want breaking changes on major versions. So to do that correctly, what we have to do now is our adapter needs to be released with 2.0. But everything before 2.0, we want to position ourselves to kind of continue to have Mongoose as one of the dependencies of Payload, everything, 1 point whatever. And we can keep building this adapter pattern right into everything in the Payload core. The dependencies stay the same. And then with 2.0, the plan is to you'll have to install the dependencies for the database that you want. So your database adapter says, oh, I'm on Mongo, now I need Mongoose as an additional dependency, or one of the other adapters that we hope to release kind of in tandem at the same time once it's all ready. And then that way, yeah, you're not installing extra dependencies, but know that there will be a breaking change coming just to stay on Mongo when you go to 2 point whatever. And yeah, we already talked about migrations quite a bit, so I'm going to skip that last bullet. Anything else?
One thing I would comment on, just like the Payload team internally will be identifying one ORM and one database to support. And we're going to do that in an official way, like in advance of 2.0, once we have our pattern. Like that's the fourth bullet there. And in the meantime, you will have to, before 2.0, you will have to have Mongoose installed and whatever ORM we want to bring in. And that's going to be kind of a pain. But 2.0 is coming up quick. And so at that point, you can remove, if you want to use Postgres, for example, you could we will remove Mongoose from the equation and you just install your own adapter.
Yeah.
All right. Time to shine.
The adapter pattern. So obviously, there's a lot of touch points within Payload that needs to talk to the database or build schema for the database. We're just abstracting all of that right now. There's a branch started for it. An adapter needs to be written so that it can handle, these bullet points, but then thinking too about even things like login, how that's going to work. So basically there's a relationship between calling Payload core consistently throughout the code base that hits the adapter interfaces that we're developing, totally type safe interfaces. So you'll know if you need to, maybe let me make changes to Payload in the future and we have to add some extra database stuff, we're going to be able to say definitively, this method was added as to the interface and we're going to need to support that for this version and further for an adapter getting released so that we can maintain what are the updates in the packages, right? Anything else there?
Maybe we touch on the dynamic schema construction a little bit. This needs to be fast. I'm going to edit this slide right now, and I'm going to just say this needs to be fast because this will happen on init. This needs to be fast. There we go. And I'm going to put this in red because I'm a maniac. There we go.
Like it.
The point is, because we are going to be looking at your schema on init right now, how we do with Mongoose, we actually create the models, as everybody's familiar with how to do that with Mongoose. But it needs to be blazingly fast. I think Prisma just came out with a post that described why they had such bad cold starts. And they were doing weird megabytes worth of JSON stuff that really slowed down the initial init. And that's not going to happen with us. That's a huge thing. Initializing Payload needs to happen within milliseconds. And that will have ORM ramifications for sure. Yeah. I think Vanillin, I don't know how to pronounce your name, but I'm dying to know what you are writing. There you go. Holy shit.
That's it.
Whoops. Probably shouldn't swear on stream, but
It's
too bad.
fine. We're all adults.
Yeah. It needs to be fast. Totally. I totally get it. My virgin ears. I apologize. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, Luciano, I think you and I talked about this in the past, and I agree with you. Like the more I looked into Prisma and the more I looked into what they do, it is likely that we're going to have some serious obstacles with Prisma, and I'm not a big fan of that. So I agree. Oh
Yeah.
well, I agree right now, but I'd like everybody else to chime in. Connects, that is on our list. We will be talking about that shortly. I don't have your answer now, but I would like to know what you think. I don't know what bookshelf is.
I've heard of
I might-
bookshelf, but I don't. Maybe
It's just
maybe
another
part of that
ORM.
counts.
It's another
Okay.
ORM that we evaluated early on.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, I do remember that. That's like reaching into the archives of my memory. All right. Cool.
Yeah, 5 years ago.
So ORM database specific features, we're going to get into that in a minute. Like what we're looking at, what the lens that we're going to be approaching this from is to support payload features. And if you opt into Postgres and there's some fancy thing that Postgres can do that nobody else can do, then you're going to do that outside of the payload config, unless there's a plugin or something that can like augment something. But it should be all based on what payload can do. And so there will be differences with like SQLite versus Postgres, like specifically JSON and querying on JSON and whatever. And there might be a limitation on like how you can query an index on JSON content inside of SQLite that might not be a problem in Postgres. That we can't control.
Yeah.
So if we do support SQLite, maybe there will be some drawbacks, but we're just looking at it from payload. That's it. If payload can do it, then every ORM that we support should be able to do it. Drizzle is interesting. I think we have some Drizzle guys on this call right now. I think. Where are you? If they are not here, then they will be. All right. Yep. All right, Danny.
Yeah, nailing down the idea there that like we don't want to compromise on what we all know we like about Payload right now, and that is your development speed. You're moving fast. You're changing your configuration so that you get schema changes on the fly. You've got obviously adding many fields, but also going back to the idea that you can add localization. You can make a relationship to has many versus only one type of thing, and making sure none of that breaks. That you're just ripping and continue to cruise when you develop. We need to get our CLI figured out where, right now the only real commands we do are like to generate your types, to generate your GraphQL schema, and we're going to be adding things for handling migrations. So does it look like a bigger CLI tool? And then the adapters being able to support those calls is important. The handling of data transformation. So we've got to make sure that, our idea of migrations are they're going to be TypeScript. So you're going to have to write these out where it's not just raw SQL. You're going to be probably querying some data. Like again, I said, you're going to transform some data and then put it in places that it goes after you do your DDL changes. So we need like a very, you just need the interface to support what are these calls going to look like so that they can all be consistent. I don't want somebody to have to learn how to do Postgres migration payload calls versus doing it in Mongo. There are going to be differences, but you shouldn't have to like go back and read the manual each time. That's fine. That's all I want to figure out. And then, exposing controls, like what are the actual commands? What are the options that we can make sure people are doing migrations the best way possible? In research, in Laravel, there's like a flag for isolate so that if you have a multi-server implementation, so many servers talking to one database, you run the migration only on one server and you're locked out so that other instances don't try to call the same migrations at the same time, that kind of thing. We got to get that right.
Yep.
And then, we want everything to be a function. Some migration patterns with other tools have you do SQL, and I don't want people to have to go and learn how to do really complex SQL querying just to move some data around because they wanted to localize a field. Like that sucks. I don't want to do that.
Totally. Let's nail out some of these questions real quick. ORM on Rust. I love that. I just can't believe the performance increase from using a tool like Vite or ESBuild natively or SWC versus Webpack. Like that, when I started playing around with that, I was like, damn, the industry is about to change. This is like too good to pass up. And if there's a good ORM that works with Rust, I'm all about that. I don't know about it yet, but that's where you guys come in. So also the SQL IDs to UUIDs. Good question. We probably need to support both, honestly, and with an opt-in pattern, so an auto-incrementing integer or UUIDs. That's a really good question. Right now, we do support custom IDs already, so it shouldn't be too much work to extend that. Migrations in the admin UI, yeah, you can disable admin UI altogether. So, and you also have to consider that, like when Payload initializes, your schema will be initialized, and you probably need to run those migrations and think about when you initialize Payload and how all of that works together. So that could be fairly complex, but it could be an option for sure. Let's see. Dumb front-end dev question. I also love MongoDB because of that. That's why we picked it. Our goal is to optimize the developer experience. I mean, that's the slide right here. Like, we don't want to introduce crazy complexities. Like, imagine if you added a field and bam, you need a migration just for that one field that you added. Like, oh, I added a name field. I got a migration to add that column. Like, we want to do some of that behind the scenes automatically, but then allow you to just say, okay, I'm good. Let's do the migration now in a file. And we're going to try to expose granular controls about that. MySQL will be coming. Diesel sounds great. I don't know anything about it, but let's put it on the list. Why do you want the user to choose the database? That's a really good question. I feel passionately about that. I think that MongoDB is the best choice, but Tech Twitter has their own opinions, and I, unfortunately, like there's a saying in Y Combinator, like listen to your users. Like, and even if I think they're wrong, sometimes we need to, I mean, it's not going to be hard for us to do, so we might as well do it. Like, if you want to keep using Mongo, do it. I probably will too, but there's no harm in supporting a new adapter, I don't think. Yeah, the mob.
With MongoDB too, like there are enterprise constraints, right? Like we don't all work in a vacuum. We don't all choose everything that we get to use. If an organization says we don't do Mongo, then I can't use Payload, and that sucks. But I'm not going to quit my job over it. I mean, maybe you should. Like that's an option.
Yep. Maybe circa 21.
Please don't quit.
Yeah, you guys are lighting it up and it's all good stuff. So I got to comment. MySQL definitely. Generate migration scripts, Luciano, 100%. That's the way we're looking at this. You don't want to run those things automatically in production. That's a huge concern. Like 100%, that is on our radar. Yeah, can't always deploy Mongo. That's accurate. Totally. Pick the right tool for the job, giving him freedom to choose. I totally agree. Very good way to look at it. Yeah, Ortovox. Man, you guys have some tough to pronounce names. I get it. So yeah, Vercel, we have a shared Slack channel with Vercel, and I personally really look up to them. We don't want to like go too far down the vendor lock-in avenue, and it would be really nice to just go and, hey, rebuild Payload on Next and be able to deploy it on Vercel and use Postgres and use their blob storage and like 100% out of the gate go Vercel, but that is problematic, and we're not going to do that. We will be able to be agnostic with architecture. So we are always going to support MongoDB. I will promise you that. MongoDB is not going anywhere. Like I said, that is my choice, and good thing I'm in charge of the company. So that's not going anywhere. No vendor lock-in. Let's see. Anybody else? What do we got here? Not Vercel. Yeah. All right. We're going to keep cruising. You guys are lighting it up. This is great.
It is great. Okay. So obviously when we're going into SQL, there's going to be a lot of challenges. No one's going to be shocked to see these things as points. But just at a high level, We have some interesting work to do with population. If you're familiar with the depth parameter on your API queries, we need to make sure we're, flushing out and filling in all these relationships that people need on every request. That's got to be consistent from no matter what your database is. And then handling that schema changing on config save. The payload config, we always want to keep that as like that is how you interface everything from plugins to project. That's got to always be the source of truth. And then we already have this a little bit, but we're going to have a generic so that when you have your own payload project with a different database adapter, that model is going to change slightly, right? Like if one thing is using Drizzle and you're using MongoDB, the exact function calls that are available to the payload collections, your slug, and then your model, that's going to be dynamic. It's going to change from project to project. And so that's going to be part of the adapter. It's a generic. Then we have all these different complex data structures we're going to nail down, figure out, well, what is the best way to store point field and blocks and arrays and fields with has many, like all these different scenarios that, again, MongoDB, nested structures, pretty easy to do. Now we have to figure out how do we make sure that we have a balance between the developer experience. If you need to go in and query some data, is that going to be a pain in the ass? We need to make sure that it's performant. If we just said, let's suffix a bunch of fields under many nested groups, your table structure would end up being hundreds of columns potentially on a collection, and that's not going to be performant. Same with locales. So we have a lot of let's figure out the best way to model all of these different schemas, all these different types, and where does it make sense to go into a JSON field versus just trying to be a flat structure on the table structure. What do you got?
Yeah. All right. First off, Thomas, your comment, I totally agree with that. The admin panel is our value. Like we are half ORM, half CMS. Well, 1/3 ORM, 1/3 CMS, 1/3 like just business admin tool. And our strength relies on our UI. And that's our primary concern. I want these database adapters to live in a vacuum. They can be community generated. We're going to maintain a couple of them, but I do not want that to slow our progress down at all. I think our adapter pattern here is going to be key to that. But yeah, I totally agree. Like the admin UI is our primary concern. No breaking changes, more granular population for sure. We will talk about that shortly. I think population, the concern is performance. It is solely performance. Granularity is also important, but like with MongoDB, we obviously use the data loader pattern to batch together all of our populations, and that works really well. We could do the same thing for SQL databases, although we might have opportunity to make it faster by doing joins, and everybody knows the rest of that story. Yeah. Also, we are only 10 employees right now, like Jake is saying right now. Even having cloud puts a lot of extra pressure on us. But we're doing all this with 10 people. My theory on that is that we want to hire a bunch of Quentin Tarantinos that really care about their craft, and that I'm not hiring any Michael Bays. We're not bringing in people that don't care about what they do and produce shit. We're only going to hire people that are like top tier. We want to build awesome stuff, and that's going to be the key here. 10Xers. Yep. All right. Keep going.
Yeah, I like the gifs in the chat. That's fun.
Also,
right.
That's a great movie. If no one knows what that movie is, you need to go do some research and culture yourself.
You have a lot of movie opinions here I didn't know about.
I do. Lost in translation.
So let's jump in. So you guys have mentioned like all of these already, right? This is no surprise this list shows up, but it's not the list, right? Like we are just in the evaluation stage right now. We're worried about performance. We're worried about, ease of use, how it's going to work. We have a lot of work to do in this area. The first thing we're doing is just making an adapter for our own Mongoose implementation. That's going to inform the next round of what comes next. So there's a bunch of pros and cons to all of these, and we just need to get deep into it. James, do you want to highlight any of these points here?
I sure do. Luciano, you changed my mind about Prisma pretty quickly. I started looking into it and I started seeing that it's probably not going to be a good fit for us. You have to have a schema file, number one, and we have to literally write out strings. That's how Keystone does that. They literally have functions that output strings. They generate string schema files. And to me, that gives me rare forms of every disease on the planet. I do not want that to happen to us. But also just like the single source of truth. Like, I think that the way that Mongoose lets us dynamically generate schemas is actually very awesome. And having these files that have to be generated that sit next to your schema, like it's duplicative and it's not clean, and that's not ideal for us. So that just seems like there's a lot of complexity there that I want to avoid. Also, the file size and the startup time and everything with Prisma makes me feel like it's going to have some obstacles to overcome. They could get in there and clean it up.
Oh, sorry. When you talk about writing extra files too for schema, I'm thinking about cloud support and people that don't include the right files to deploy their apps. That's going to be a pain, right?
Yep. Absolutely. So Drizzle, I know we have some Drizzle boys in here now. I see Andre. I don't know if that's how to pronounce your name. I apologize in advance. But I think you guys are faster than Prisma, which makes me very excited. Prisma or Speed, Andrew. Okay. All right. I'd really like to learn how to pronounce that. We're going to have another call because we have more questions for you. But the Drizzle boys. Yeah, we like that Drizzle's faster. We want to obsess over performance. That is a very high priority for us. But with Drizzle, there's a few things that we've kind of played around with and uncovered. We also need duplicative schema files in Drizzle. And I don't, because we're not going to be using your TypeScript inference with your infer type, we already have our own generated types. Maybe there's a way that we can work together to be able to dynamically generate models rather than having file system based schemas. Nothing should be written to the file system. So with Payload, that is our Payload config, and we do not want to duplicate there. Also with migrations, we do need to have a way to programmatically transform data as well and have a full CLI suite that not only outputs literal SQL queries to run your migrations, but also is a functional way to do it. Just like Laravel does. Like when you create a new migration in Laravel, you have the up and the down, and then everything is based on transactions, and you can do whatever you want in those functions. That is our goal to have, and it will be a programmatic thing so that I think I don't remember who said this, but we don't want you to just have to you start up your server in production and then bam, your data goes crazy. No, you need to have control over that. And so these migrations are going to be key, and we want them to work across the board. Yeah, Chris, welcome. About time. I haven't seen you in here yet. Was going to just go hassle you in a minute. So, yeah, hopefully lunch is good. I'm hungry. Feed me. Yeah, so Mongoose is going to stay as it is. We are not doing anything different there. There will be zero breaking changes. In the future, we might do a vanilla MongoDB adapter because we don't really need Mongoose. So we will support Mongoose. That's the first thing we're going to do. But we might just go for the vanilla MongoDB driver and simplify in the future.
The only thing that's not as is about that is obviously we need to add migrations because of the data transform problem.
Yep.
So more features, but not less of anything.
Absolutely. Yes. Connects, as Derek is mentioning, they do have migration capability, and they do have the syntax for adding a column and adding a table and creating indexes in TypeScript. And that is what we want. That, I think I'm going to guess that Drizzle is faster than Connects as well. And so you guys are in the spotlight. Drizzle, you are in the spotlight right now. If you're faster than Connects, we're all about it. If we can figure out how to solve these couple of issues in that column right there, then let's make it rain. But there are some good things about Connects. It's all dynamic. You can do it programmatically. It's all TypeScript migrations. I like it. But yeah. I don't like slow. Yeah. Drupal, that's a swear word, isn't it? Isn't that Portuguese or something? Swear. Just kidding.
That just sent me back in time to my freelance days. I don't
Figured
miss
you-
any of that.
When you were spry?
Yeah, back when I was young.
All right. Yeah, so ORMs, like there are obviously a lot of other ones like type ORM and micro ORM, and this screen is here because the payload team wants to identify one to build like ourselves. You can always build an integration with any one of these. If we do our adapter pattern right, you should be able to use any ORM with payload. But we want to support one first. And so that's why this screen exists.
Yeah.
All right, prepared statements. I like that. Sounds nice. Ooh, was that Jessica with the chili pepper there? Nope, that was Nate. All right. All right. Keeping me on my toes. All right. So let's go to the next slide. What's next, Dan?
Yeah, I've got it. So obviously, yeah, getting more adapters, figuring out that workflow that we are in V1. We need to build out this pattern. We need to have that merged in so we don't have breaking changes with, we will have breaking changes. What I meant to say is so that we don't have a bunch of merge conflicts as we're getting closer to 2.0 and all these great things are coming. I want to get my adapter pattern merged in at a point where we can keep our not losing any our just speed of development with these community PRs that are rolling in. The adapter pattern is going to include everything for migration support. We got to get all that figured out and hammered out. So we're going to be building, proof of concepts for adapters and then benchmarking the crap out of them to make sure we're doing things right. Benchmarking them in terms of just query performance, server startup speed, and then getting into that edge compatibility, making sure that our dependencies don't continue to blow up and have way too heavy of an overall package when you build your payload projects. And obviously, I kind of just skipped over handling the complex data structures. Again, it's going to be wild. We're going to get into it real heavy, figure out the best way to do all these different field types and features that we already have.
Yep. I do want to bounce around for a minute because timeline, number one, we want to have this done by Q2, so July 1st.
Yeah.
Also, I'm about to blast Thomas in the chat because I don't think we covered this in detail enough, but where was it?
It's way at the beginning. You're looking for HMR? Here we go.
Server-side hot module reloading. It's not literally hot module reloading, but Thomas has a PR already that allows like Payload to not have to use NodeMon and just update and remount like endpoints and recompile the models. And that's programmatic, right? Like that needs to happen when a certain file changes, and we need that. That's huge. That's a huge goal out of all of this. And I think Thomas, some of his work in his PR is very Mongoose specific, and you can do that with Mongoose. It's great. You just rebuild the models. We have these functions already ready to go, but we need to do that with SQL as well. That's going to be a huge thing here. Just wanted to really put some emphasis on that, and we need some help with that. I expect that a lot of you have very strong opinions. DSOD also is thinking about hot module reloading on the server, but that's going to be huge. Okay, one more thing I want to revisit is the complex data structures. Wait a second. What's our last? Okay, yeah. I think we need to dwell on this a little bit right here.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can throw out some examples, and I'm going to type in the chat. First database we don't know yet, probably Postgres. Bidirectional relationships. Yep, we got it. Alessio, that's just for you. Yep. But I'm going to write some stupid things in chat right now. Query by. Oh, yeah. Okay. That's cool. You should open up a discussion about that. That's a good feature. We'll put it on the roadmap. One thing, though, like let's take groups, for example. Like right now in Payload, you can have my group dot my field. And that is a string. And in Mongo, obviously, you just plop that in the database and you're good. But in SQL, what does that look like in a column structure? Do we have a column that is named something like my group __ my field for every nested field? Like, what's the goal there? There's some decisions that we have to make. Like, we can just toggle on JSON columns for everything, and then all of a sudden you have MongoDB running on Postgres, and that's garbage, I think. some of you have advocated for that, and I definitely like don't want to discount it, but that will create complexities with MySQL and with SQLite. And if we really want to support SQLite as well, which I think would be great, we have to carefully consider what we do with JSON fields. Yeah, resolver functions for sure. But like,
Yeah.
let's take, what if that was a different like table? What if every group was a table that had to be joined in? That's not, I mean, that's not ideal either, right? But we do have to figure out a pattern. And the next example I'm going to write is locales. Like if you have my text field and that is localized in Payload, that's actually my text field .en is a string, and then my text field .es is a string. But what do we do with localized fields with SQL? Does that become my text field __en string? Or are literally all of those joins? That would be a nightmare. I don't want to do that. But like we have to figure out a pattern for what we name our columns and how we name them to manage our complex schemas. Arrays and groups or arrays and blocks will probably have to be separate tables that get joined in. Point fields, bidirectional, has many. That's one in and of itself. Like we need to store array-based data. And then singletons like globals we need to handle as well. So there's this part, I think, is very important that we get this down and have community consensus about this. So we should talk about this in further depth on the discussion on GitHub. But this is, I think, going to be one of our biggest challenges with SQL-like databases right here. Yeah.
Good comments here about other options, what other people are doing.
Yep, we got to look into Prisma. Population, yeah. I mean, what we have right now for population is pretty good, I think. It's fast, and we could use that same pattern for populations and just add more granularity and maybe opt in to actually join, like using joins instead. But that, yeah, lots of questions there. Okay, we have one more slide. Where can you help? So maybe I'll take this one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Dan and I and Elliot and the whole team, we're going to be working on this adapter pattern like now. And we want to build this fast and it will iterate. We will use it behind the scenes in Payload 1 before we release 2.0 like Dan mentioned. But once we have this adapter pattern, it is free reign. It's time to build adapters for other databases, other ORMs. We can experiment, we can push. And we'd like to do this in parallel so that maybe multiple adapters are being experimented with and the best one will win. But like the community could really help us out here. Like once we have this adapter pattern, it's go time and anybody can jump in and just, it'll be very well documented. You'll have to provide methods for every action that we want. But if we can really work together as a community on this adapter pattern, that would be amazing once we have it. Complex data structures, I talked about that. Supabase, absolutely. Permissions on populations, we already have that actually. That is really, really good in Payload. That's like a done deal, and it works extremely well. The underscore pattern for locale, that is actually, yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. I agree. Micro ORM, we need to look into that. Codathon, hackathon, yeah, let's do it. Man, that gives me like cardiac arrest to think about, but I think we need it. And then we just want to know edge cases. Like, what do you guys want to use SQL for? What's the reason? Like, you ask me, and I'll say MongoDB does everything better than SQL for a CMS because you don't have to deal with any of the stuff I just mentioned. And your database is literally the exact same shape as the output from the API. But you guys want SQL-based databases, and we want to hear from you. Like, what are the reasons? What do we want to make sure that we capitalize on when we implement SQL-like databases? We want to have a very open conversation about that. Yeah.
Jared linked a GitHub discussion. That's a good one to just put your thoughts into, especially after the fact. If you're watching this and it's recorded and you want to chime in, we're going to keep our eye on that discussion for sure.
Is this recorded, Sean? Did that work?
Only the audio is recorded, not the video.
Well, I guess no one can see our faces, but that doesn't matter.
Well, we
Podcast.
should release the slides when we put that content out there.
Yeah, we
Yep.
should. Good call.
Another thing to mention too with like where can you help is I think that we're going to see more and more cloud-based databases like serverless things coming out that are gaining popularity now already. And those are just more adapters, right? Like we should be able to have adapters for those solutions. We can't
Absolutely.
manage all of them, I don't think. You know, our team's not big enough today. So there's going to be more and more of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Some good comments coming in. I think data extraction reporting, definitely. That makes perfect sense. Scalability, I haven't personally run into any issues with like lots and lots of records with Mongo. But I think that you're right. I think that eventually SQL might start to outperform MongoDB, but I don't have any proof of that. So I'm salty right now. Aggregations, you can.
Right. High volume. There's some early discussions like from a while ago where at least somebody has been doing this with like, well, what if I have hundreds of thousands of records? And there are some optimizations we can make, but that's something we can revisit.
Absolutely. Okay, several people are typing, but let's Elliot, do you have any comments? Anything that you'd like to chime in with?
Really, for me, is I just don't want to deal with raw SQL. As long as everything that we do is in TypeScript. I know like some of the ORMs spit out files, and really the issue is how do we work with that? And how do we make that most transparent for Payload users, right? But,
And not
yeah,
duplicate.
that's about it.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100K records. Yeah, I mean, any database should be able to do that. Andrew, you're right.
Yeah.
Aggregations you can do with Mongo right now. I keep saying Mongo, and I actually need to get that out of my brain. It's MongoDB. Yeah. Raw queries, let's try to avoid that. I think everybody's on the same page there. Hey, Chris. Yeah, there you go. Oh, there you go. Yeah, Luciano, let's do it. Make sure that you can do SQL injection on that as well, just to keep everybody on their toes. That's good idea.
For sure.
Help, really community stuff there. All right, Sean, do you have anything? How are you feeling? We're gonna go to Home Depot. Me and Spider are going to Home Depot after this to buy some cabinets for our office, which we will have an open house. And if you are in the Midwest of the United States, or you want to come to the Midwest, it will be in the summer, and Michigan is beautiful in the summer, and we will have an office that we are going to open it up, and we're going to have a big party. So if anybody wants to come by for that, you should.
Tylen, I see you typing. Aha.
Tylen. Yeah, Tylen, I was probably working on my stupid car. Like my battery died, and Sean was helping me take the battery out of the car, and I have it on a charger in my kitchen right here. So that's what I was doing.
It's because Audis are just really nice to own. So
Yep. Oh, Rocket League for sure. For sure. And I want someone to beat me. Please. That will happen at our office, and I expect all of you to come with your aerials and your air dribbles. Let's do it. Trickle charger. Yeah, that's what I got going right now. It's almost done. We're just starting to kind of go off the rails a little bit. Ping pong, Pat. That'll be after the half pipe and after the racing sims. So Alessio is going to have to put down some lap times in the racing sims. CS2 for sure. Oh man, now we're really going.
We're just nerding out. This is great.
You guys just want to talk about video games. We should just have a live stream about video games.
Yeah, forget databases. Let's just play games.
The Sims, Jared, 1.6. That was my like baby food. Yeah, next payload planning. What video games? Oh man.
And the community should chime in here with what do you want to discuss next too? If you want to hear us talk about something else in depth, let's hear it right now.
Well, the Webpack replacement, we'll be doing one on that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of other stuff.
Speaking of the adapter pattern, we should talk about adapters a little bit because we have an adapter pattern right now in the cloud storage plugin, right? That was kind of our first go with serious about doing adapters. I want S3, you want GCS, handle that. But now we're talking about adapters for database, and we're going to be talking about it for Webpack. We're going to be talking about it for just our image handling. Like we do image resizing with Sharp, which is bloated and go. It shouldn't be in core. There's going to be other things like that. Adapter pattern will be key for these things.
Absolutely. That's going to be key for a lot of Payload's future for sure. Real-time collaboration, totally. Live preview, that's coming. Probably on that version thing, but that scares me. Vendor lock-in, I don't like that. I hope, yeah. I also don't know how I feel about that content mapping thing that Sanity came out with. It's ugly to look at, and their docs make me feel like I need a PhD. Feel like I'm pretty smart, but those docs really get me good.
Well, it's an actual standard that they'll be supporting, so I mean, you got to put stock in that at least.
Totally. When we will. I mean, we will. Yeah, so Sharp, that one's going out for 2.0 as well. I almost said P2. Been watching Formula One too much. All right, I think we're good. Let's wrap it up. Thank you everyone for coming, and this was a lot of fun. We will be doing this more, and let's make some magic happen.
Yeah, send us your feedback. We'd love to hear from everyone. This has been great.